He's a gentleman who said that he finds it difficult sometimes to bite his tongue and hold back. That was probably an understatement, particularly if you've ever heard him discuss or debate the issues of the all-polyethylene tibial cemented component. Now, the presentation he's going to give, I thought, would be interesting, as I have had the pleasure of actually visiting Baroda and staying with Bharat and his charming wife, Harshita. We visited what I thought was an extraordinary hospital. If Bharat ever retires, he could have a job as a magician. He's certainly one person, if anybody could ever pull a rabbit out of a hat, I'm sure Parag would be able to do that. Sorry, Bharat would be able to do that. So I want him to actually present on how to create a healthcare institution that can deliver community care, because his institution, if you ever get the opportunity in Baroda, is one that is actually worth seeing. Parag, thank you. Sorry, Bharat, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rami. It's been a pleasure to have you as a friend, and I really appreciate this particular acknowledgement of the labors that I had put in when I built this hospital. So without further ado, I would like to say that building a healthcare institution of any significant size and quality is nothing less than performing the labors of Hercules, breaking the Abhimanyu's chakra. For the foreign faculties here, they would probably not be familiar with this. It's one of the legends of our Mahabharata, that one of the most difficult things to achieve was to break this circle in military sense in our legendary legends of our Mahabharata. Vitruvius, a Roman military architect, said that a building should satisfy these three principles: durability, utility, and beauty. The process of building a healthcare hospital, from my own personal experience, I have divided it into 6 phases. Phase 1, ideation and project analysis, and we'll go into this detail in a moment. Phase 2, land procurement. So let's go to the next slide. Phase 1. This is the most important phase, gentlemen. Introspect. When you get the idea to build a hospital, introspect. Why do I want to do it? Am I trying to catch up, outdo, or compete with a peer who has done it? Or is there a business opportunity for you in running a hospital platform? So many times I find that the motivation is more to do with we feeling that someone else has gone light years ahead just because he owns a beautiful hospital. Think carefully. Do I have the necessary strength? Because you need diversified areas of interest, energy, grit, financial ability, and much more. Once clear on the above, start collecting information, discuss with various relevant persons or hire professional agencies. For example, chartered accountants, hospital consultants, etc. And then do a SWOT analysis. This is a financial world jargon, SWOT. It means strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. Any business, before you start, you should analyze it in these 4 different aspects. And your financial planners will help you understand this concept. So each phase I have divided into 2 things. What is that phase represent, and which are the agencies that you would need to connect with if you wanted to go ahead. So agencies to interface in phase 1 are family members, friends and well-wishers, chartered accountant, hospital consultant agencies, banks, financial investors, and lawyers. This is what is involved in phase 1. Phase 2, land procurement. This, whilst the phase 1 was the most important phase, this is the most difficult phase in India at least, because the hurdle, getting a suitably sized land which has title clearance, non-agricultural status, in a commercial zone, to get a land at an opportune location in India with all those qualifications is just short of finding God. Agricultural status land is a minefield. Unless you understand the business of buying land, don't jump into it headlong. You will lose a lifetime of earnings and savings. The agencies to interface at this stage would be land agents, prospective sellers of land, revenue department, municipal corporation, the urban development authority, town planning department, architects specializing in local building bylaws, etc., And these are different from architects who are actually design architects of a hospital. And then lawyers specializing in creating a secure deed documentation. Phase 3, identifying and hiring design consultants, which means now you've reached the point. So this is the most critical phase. The first one was the most important. The next one was the most difficult, and now is the most critical phase. Abraham Lincoln once said, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 6 of those hours sharpening my axe. This is exactly what I would strongly recommend. There was a time in my particular journey when my friends and colleagues started feeling that maybe I have just been talking, I am not actually going to execute my project, because I took 2 years or more just designing the project, right up to the last switchboard, the last screw that went into it. Everything was in here before I broke land. So, unfortunately, although the fact is that the more time you invest in doing an exhaustive and comprehensive task at the design phase of your project, the less time and resource will you waste during the execution. However, most of us end up thinking, almost always the mistake that is made is to initiate the project as soon as the first set of drawings are in your hands, and then you think that the remaining drawings will fall into place as the project goes along. Nothing can be further from the truth. So gentlemen, spend your time, heed Abraham Lincoln's advice to us. The agencies to interfere here would be in 2 categories. The major agencies, and look at the list: design architect, structural engineer, HVAC, electrical, plumbing consultant, low voltage system consultant, and look what is meant by low voltage, information technology, hardware consultant, hospital information system consultant, which is the software part, interior design consultant. These are the major. And then you will have the minor agencies like nurse call designer, access control, time attendance. None of these are of minor importance. For example, the nurse call system, you might feel that it is the least important thing. But when you come to think of it, it is actually the only way by which your patients will be able to communicate during their hospitalization with the rest of your team members, right from doctors, nurses, janitors, etc. In fact, the only thing I have devised in my hospital building since having built it is the nurse call system. I spent lakhs of rupees once more just to rip out the old nurse call system and put in a new one, despite all my planning, because I realized that I had tried to pinch a penny there, and it was not doing the job that it should in terms of patient satisfaction. Then you enter the phase 4, and now that your designs are ready, your plans are ready, tendering, bidding, and finalization. This is the most commercially challenging part of the process. But doing an efficient job here in terms of identifying truly accomplished contracting entities with a fair price for both sides. Please understand, any business is worth doing if both sides are benefiting. If you try to take the complete profit out of that activity, you will find that you will only get jokers who are ready to partner with you, and very soon you will get into trouble. Wrong choice here can lead to irritation at the least, and litigation and suspension of work at the worst. So give a fair deal to your contracting agencies. Phase 4, agencies to interface would be all these, the equivalent of the list that you saw in the designing part. But here, the designers are different from the contracting agencies. Remember that. And so the list just goes on in the phase 4. The last one I'm keeping here, operation theaters. For most of us sitting here, well, every one of us sitting here, the most critical area here would be the operation theater in the ICU. And we'll see a little in a moment. Phase 5, now you are entering the last but one phase. This is the most arduous, frustrating, and exhausting part of the process. You have done all the research, you have done the designing, you have contracted, you have tied up your finances. Even if one presumes that all the previous steps have been done with great efficiency, this part will leave an indelible sense of nightmare for the rest of one's life, and I promise you that. At one point in time, there will be 40 different agencies working simultaneously, each with a mind of its own, seemingly blind to each other's needs. And your job will be to coordinate all of this and ensure that each one does a job so that they are not obstructing the other's job. Sticking to timelines, etc., will be a Herculean task. You will need an extremely efficient project management team, which is genuinely loyal to you. Otherwise, we'll end up going over budget. And finally, commissioning of the building or the project. This phase includes a period of building your organogram, recruiting a core team for different departments, the initial training, etc. It includes getting the necessary permissions. You have done everything as per rule, but still getting permissions from these various departments, governmental, semi-governmental, regulatory agencies. It also includes getting electricity connection, water supply connection, drainage, completion, occupation, etc., etc., etc. And you might feel that having done such a beautiful job, why should I be denied or have to go through pain? Be ready to go through pain even at this later stage. And now you might feel that you have just ended up creating a beautiful buggy. Gentlemen, let me remind you, all you have created is not a buggy but a bull. This is where the rodeo fight starts. 6 seconds, the ability to remain 6 seconds on top of that bull is considered to be a winning performance. And I can assure you that what you have created is a bull in a rodeo ring and not a buggy that you feel you can ride. I would like to give you a glimpse of my personal journey in creating WellCare Hospital. And this is just a quick flashback of a personal journey. The search for land started between these years. I started going through a huge, I almost can do an alternative occupation of being a land agent or a land tout in the city of Baroda. That is how exhaustive my research or attempt at getting a suitable piece of land was. And this is where we eventually ended up. It was a beautiful piece of land, with having wide roads on each side of this piece of land. And then the search for architects started. It took me to all 3 corners of our country, right up to Kolkata, Mumbai, and Delhi. And eventually, I had these presentations from people, these Manviwala Kutub are the guys who did the Wokhard hospitals. Hosmak is one of the most prolific hospital designers of this country, and Archimedes. 70% of Apollo hospitals have been built by this man. And it took me a huge amount of churning, but it was so important because if you put your effort at the concept phase, you can do things, and I'll give you a small example of what we did now. Sciography. You might not have heard about this particular field of science. Sciography is the science of study of shadows. If you apply this, and this is what we did. This is a science which has got a software. If you put in the coordinates of any spot on the planet Earth and put the shape of your building on it, it will generate a set of shadows and the sun's rays impinging on it right through the 365-day cycle, hour to hour. And this is what we did for 19 different shapes. And eventually we focused on this shape. And all this data that we gathered as a part of this study, we then gave it to the low carbon consultant. And he then decided how much using, I talked with glass engineers. Different types of glasses decide how much energy and light titration happens when the thing penetrates your building. And all this can be done only at the very initial stage. You cannot go back and revisit these points. These are psychrometric studies, which means I put in the data of wind forces that happen in that part of the city. All these were titrated, and we came out with these net figures in joules, in absolute joules, that this is the number of joules of heating that happens on this wall at this particular phase of the yearly cycle. And this we then gave to our HVAC consultant, and we designed our air conditioning system. And then you have things like the blocking diagrams, which is basically relationship of different diagrams, different departments to each other in the horizontal sense, and the stacking diagrams. This is the same thing in the vertical sense. And then you start getting your space diagrams and the folders of data build up. And this is just the first layer of folders that builds up. And I can assure you, I'll show you, just take one of those folders, and then you have these subfolders, and a subfolder, and a subfolder. The data just keeps on piling and piling. But once you go through that grind, this is the sort of result you can get. One of the most expensive parts of running a large building is the electricity cost in air conditioning it. My initial studies of sciography, etc., has helped me so that these are my first 2 years of electricity usage. We just analyze it. Along with some data, I present the evidence as well with electricity bills that have been given to us by the department. And we just spent 3.22 rupees per square foot per month to keep a building satisfyingly air conditioned. And that's all because of the initial work of how to design the building that we did. This is just a photographic review of the building as it went ahead. It's a, you could call it a dream now. It was a nightmare then. And we are reaching I'll just taking you through a visual journey of what eventually we could accomplish as a result of all the work that we did. And uh, gentlemen, these are just the different areas. I don't want to, the labels speak for themselves. This is where you might find more interest. The operation theaters. I can give a talk on just how to design an efficient operation theater at some other point in time if people are interested. We have taken small little details. I, in fact, sat down with the larger, I'll just give a quick understanding. Most of the time you think that the operation theater design it will be someone from the hospital field. But what is an operation theater? It is, if anything, it is a clean air facility. And I realized that the clean air facility creators, the largest amount of work and the most advanced science is in the field of electronics, not in the field of hospital construction. So I contacted an Italian company called Nicomac, who provides this for pharmaceutical, USFDA approved pharmaceutical plants and for electronic industry, because dust control is far more important in the electronic industry than in our field of work. And the managing director initially said that your quantities are too low, so they don't interest us. And I told Tony that, look man, you are in the volume business. I am trying to point out a margin business for you. He sat down, we did this operation theaters, and can you believe it, he has floated a new division and he can't keep up with the orders now as far as operation theaters, because they brought state-of-the-art technology in creating operation theaters which are nothing if not clean air facilities. So we have this type of sensors at the right moment so that fomite transmissions don't happen from the ward side into the operation theater side. And then each segment is important. The flooring, I'm showing this because this is a flooring imported from Germany. The ceiling, each one of these has a subject and science to offer on its own. Even our scrub sinks, these are designed by myself actually. The small curvature that leads you in is essentially to accommodate the paunch of successful surgeons so that they don't stand away from the scrub sink and allow the drip to fall onto the water. So you can see that the elbows are now well within the confines of the scrub sink without having to lean over, because the paunch is accommodated by that curve, and it looks good anyway. And this is the clean core. We have that black box that you see up there is the heart of our audiovisual system. All our operation theaters are designed to transmit live surgical demonstrations live at high definition in any part of the world that you wish. At the drop of a hat, we can do that. We don't have to, I would love to have Anand all the time around, but we don't need him on a daily basis at our hospital. And I must acknowledge him. In fact, he taught me about the nitty-gritty of video signals, etc., before I went in for deciding. So we have, these are all the covings, etc., and just putting a laminar flow is not enough. It needs to be validated. What you are seeing here is what is known as a penetration test. The penetration test is basically that small box that you see at the top is throwing particles into the inlet system of and it is being monitored, and there has to be zero penetration, as you see on the counter there. So the percentage of penetration of particles larger than 0.3 microns is being tested. The average size of a bacteria is 0.5 microns, in case you don't remember that. This is the wind test, the anemometer. And we have a live system. We have a live system of monitoring our operation theaters. And please, I end my talk in the last by and we are reaching I'll just taking you through a visual journey of what eventually we could accomplish as a result of all the work that we did. And gentlemen, these are just the different areas. I don't want to, the labels speak for themselves. This is where you might find more interest. The operation theaters. I can give a talk on just how to design an efficient operation theater at some other point in time if people are interested. We have taken small little details. I, in fact, sat down with the larger, I'll just give a quick understanding. Most of the time you think that the operation theater design it will be someone from the hospital field. But what is an operation theater? It is, if anything, it is a clean air facility. And I realized that the clean air facility creators, the largest amount of work and the most advanced science is in the field of electronics, not in the field of hospital construction. So I contacted an Italian company called Nicomac, who provides this for pharmaceutical, USFDA approved pharmaceutical plants and for electronic industry, because dust control is far more important in the electronic industry than in our field of work. And the managing director initially said that your quantities are too low, so they don't interest us. And I told Tony that, look, man, you are in the volume business. I am trying to point out a margin business for you. He sat down, we did this operation theaters, and can you believe it? He has floated a new division and he can't keep up with the order.